Okay, folks, let's look at labeling in compound meters. So the first thing that you're going to do is determine what you're going to count to. Now, we have talked a lot about the fact that when we have compound meters, sometimes what we want to do is count to the top number in our time signature. Unfortunately, we cannot do that. What we need to do is we need to think of what we would conduct in these. So if we were doing 6/8, our pattern would be in 2. We would have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 1 lolly, 2 lolly. And in 9/8, we would have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly. So we are thinking here about the dotted quarter note as our beat note, what we would conduct. Or what works for some people is you say, all right, in compound meters, you take the top number and you divide it by 3. And that's going to give you your, what you're going to count to. So in 6 divided by 3 equals 2. 9/8, we have 9/3. It's going to give us 3. Okay, anyway, so in this top one, we're going to count to 2. And then in the bottom one, we're going to count to 3. Now, how do we break that up? When we have 1 for our 3/8 notes, we would break it up into 1, la, and li. And then if we were to break it up further into 16th notes, did I run out? Good job, Morgan. We still have 1, la, and li, but we need something in between. And so this here is where we get our 1 ta, la, ta, li, ta. So those are our tas. So it's like the equivalent of the and in compound or in simple meters. So 1 ta, la, ta, lita, 1 ta, la, ta, lita. Now here, if it was the second beat of that 6/8 measure, it would be 2 ta, la, ta, lita. Okay, so those are the divisions of our beat. We have 1 la, li, and 1 ta, la, ta, lita, or 2 ta, la, ta, lita, whatever it is. Okay, so now knowing that, we know we're going to count to 2 in each of these measures. So first off, are they visible? Yes, we've got 1 and we've got 2, and we just have la, li, 2, and la, li. Now, it's important to remember that when we have rests or long durations, that we need to show the things that would not be spoken in parentheses. They're still happening, but they're just not spoken out loud, like what we do with the parentheses. So here, we have the beginning of beat 1 in a parentheses. Now, do we have all of beat 1 in a parentheses? Do we have the equivalent of a dotted quarter note all in the rest? No, we have a quarter rest. So we have this extra 8th note hanging out. So we have 1 and la, and then this is li. Now, for me, it's correct if you put 1 and then li. You can, to be like more correct and very thorough, if you want, put 1 and la in there. But if you just put 1 and li, we're cool. I understand that. Okay, now we are starting over on 2. Do we have all of 2? Do we have an entire dotted 8th note or dotted quarter note taken up with just our quarter note? No, we've got 2 and la, and then we have li hanging out. Again, you don't need to put the la in a parentheses. I'm okay with that. That's not a big deal to me. So we've got li to li. Now, we're starting over on 1. We have the equivalent of a dotted quarter note on beat 1. Great, it's all finished, it's all complete. Now we're going to start here on 2, and we have straight 16th notes. So we have 2, there's our la, there's our li, and we have tas in between. 2 ta, la, ta, li, ta. Great. Let me also make this a little smaller. And now for our last measure, we're starting over on 1. And now we've got 1, there's our la, And now we have a 16th note, so we have to break that up. So we've got la, ta, and then li. Great, now we're starting over on 2, and we have our equivalent of a dotted quarter note. There it is, it's just 2. So the way that we would speak this then, in 1 la, li, 2, it goes 1 la, li, 2 la, li. Li 2, li 1, 2 ta la ta li ta 1, la ta li 2. And we have now labeled it correctly. So that's amazing. Now we're in 9/8. We're going to count to 3 here. So we start off with a rest in this first one. So we're looking to see, does that rest take up an entire dotted quarter note? No, it only takes up 1/8 note worth of the dotted quarter note. So we have 1 in a parentheses. What's left over for us to label is la and li. Now, these are together. We have a quarter note here, so we just have one in the parentheses and then la. The li is in that quarter note. Okay, now we're going to start over. Our next beat is on 2. But it's split in 2. So we have 2 ta, and then we have la and li. Great, we have our equivalent of our dotted quarter note. So we ended up with 2 ta, and then la. Let's get la. Oh my goodness, what a hot mess. So there's our la, li. All right, so we have 2 ta la, li. And then we have beat 3, we have a dotted quarter note. So we can just write 3. Great. Now we have a tie. When we have a tie, it means that this next thing, this is tied into the 3 here. We're not going to speak this out loud. So this duration, whatever it is going to go in a parentheses. We're starting over at 1. Have we used up an entire dotted quarter note worth in that quarter note? No. So we have 1 and la in that parentheses. We have a li left over. We have a li left over. And then we can start over on beat 2. Do we have the equivalent of a dotted quarter note? Yes, we have a dotted quarter rest. So we can put all of beat 2, stick it in a parentheses. We're going to start over on 3. Do we have the equivalent of a dotted quarter note? Yes, we do. It's just broken up into a bunch of stuff. So we've got 3 ta. We split it in half, 3 ta. This is going to be la. That's split in half, so we need a ta. And then we move on to li, which is not split, so it can just hang out on its own as li. And then we start over in our next measure at 1. We have not used up our whole dotted quarter note, so we have 1, and then the li is left over. We have a rest on our next beat. It's only a quarter rest though, so we've used up everything. So we have 2 and la. We have li left over, and now we have beat 3 again. We have the entire dotted quarter note taken up. Great. And then it's tied to the first dotted quarter note of our next measure. So that 1 has got to go in parentheses. And then we have a dotted whole note, which is the equivalent of 2 dotted halves. So we have 2 and then all of beat 3 tied up in that dotted half note. So the way that we would speak this, we have 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, la, 2 to lolly, 3 li, 3 to la to li, 1 li, li 3, 2. It would probably help if I tapped instead of conducted. Here's our 1 lolly, 2 lolly. Here it goes. La, 2 to lolly, 3 Li. 3 to la to Li, 1 Li. Li 3, 2, and there we go. We have correctly labeled compound meters, and we have also used ties and all kinds of stuff. So that is how to label compound meters. I hope that helps.